Winter in the Middle Ages was not just a season, but a brutal test of basic survival. Imagine a world without central heating, where thermostats exist only in your wildest dreams. When temperatures dropped below zero, most people found themselves locked in their cold, dark, and damp homes. Firewood, which we now consider the most common thing for a fire, was a real luxury back then. And if you didn't have a huge supply of good wood, winter instantly turned into a deadly ice trap. It was an unbearably harsh world where every stupid mistake was punished by immediate frostbite or quick death. But they coped brilliantly with this task, and now I will tell you exactly how this amazing feat worked. In medieval Europe, especially in flat or marshy regions, there were practically no dense forests left. The trees had long been cut down for construction, or these vast territories were strictly controlled by the greedy local nobility. Therefore, peat became the main, and sometimes the only means of salvation from the merciless winter cold. Cutting peat blocks from boggy swamps required the use of special, incredibly heavy iron shovels. This process exhausted people to the limit, forcing them to work knee-deep in dirty, icy water for hours. Imagine a modern, intense workout in a CrossFit gym, only instead of a barbell, you have a piece of wet, smelly earth. The whole family, including the youngest children, was required to participate in this grueling summer campaign to harvest fuel. The wet peat was incredibly heavy and had to be laid out very carefully to dry for a long time in the sun. The sun and strong wind gradually drew moisture out of it, turning the soft mud into something resembling solid bricks. But it gets even more interesting, because this ancient fuel had one completely unbearable drawback. When burned, dry peat emitted incredibly acrid, thick smoke that was very dangerous to breathe. This smoke instantly filled the entire cramped space of the house, creating an atmosphere of dirty London smog right in the living room. A modern extractor fan would have dealt with this in a couple of minutes, but peasant houses simply did not have proper chimneys. The smoke had to lazily escape through a small hole in the thick thatch roof above. Naturally, a good half of this acrid smoke remained inside forever, settling as greasy black soot literally everywhere. Modern scientists are genuinely amazed at how effectively peat retained the necessary thermal energy. In its chemical essence, it is a young version of coal that simply did not have time to spend millions of years underground. Peasants intuitively understood this feature and used it to their maximum and absolute advantage. They stacked peat briquettes in a special way to limit oxygen access and maximize the useful smoldering time. This subtle art of maintaining a peat fire was passed down from father to son as the most important survival skill. The fire rarely burned with a high, bright flame. Rather, it lived its slow, pulsating, hot life deep in the hearth. Peat bogs literally saved most of medieval Europe from freezing completely during periods of severe cold. Entire populous settlements grew up around these unsightly wastelands, which today seem to us to be completely useless territories. Peat harvesters often suffered severely from rheumatism due to constantly being in icy water during the summer harvest. It was a terrible price to pay voluntarily for the opportunity to sit in relative warmth on a January evening. And no one in those harsh times dared to complain about such a cruel but fair injustice of fate. The peat harvested in summer was carefully guarded around the clock, because it was much more valuable than gold in the depths of a harsh winter. Stealing someone else's ready-made fuel was considered one of the most despicable and unforgivable crimes in any rural community. Neighbors could forgive a lot, but stealing winter's life-saving warmth was punished instantly and very, very harshly. People stored briquettes in special dry sheds, or even brought part of their supplies directly into their cramped homes. No one wanted to risk their only source of life because of a sudden blizzard, dampness, or a thieving neighbor. Thus, simple, foul-smelling swamp mud became a true technological and life-saving miracle of the Middle Ages. Without this dirty, smoky, and incredibly difficult to obtain material, entire generations simply would not have been able to survive. They brilliantly adapted to conditions where nature did not provide them with luxurious forests and accessible birch firewood. Modern smart heating systems make us weak, but these people were forged from real steel. They looked at the dirty swamp and saw in it not certain death, but their main salvation from the inevitable cold. The use of dried animal manure is often mistakenly and arrogantly considered a sign of extreme and hopeless poverty. In fact, it was a brilliantly thought out and incredibly effective technological practice in treeless European regions. Peasants did not just survive somehow, they created the perfect fuel from what was literally lying at their feet. They carefully collected cow, sheep, or horse manure every day throughout the long grazing season. This combustible material was completely free, constantly renewable, and always abundant near any farm. The process of creating such homemade fuel required a deep intuitive understanding of the simple basics of composite materials. Freshly collected manure was never used in its pure form, as it burned too quickly and uselessly. Farmers always mixed it with straw, chaff, or dry grass to create a strong internal reinforcement. Then from this thick, unpleasant-smelling mass, they molded flat cakes or neat, thick briquettes of regular shape. It sounds like the recipe for the most disgusting pie in the world, but these cakes became the key to a comfortable winter. Modern engineers create ultra-strong composite panels using exactly the same principle of reinforcing the base. And now for the most interesting part, which modern city dwellers are unaware of due to their ignorance. A properly prepared manure briquette burned with an even, incredibly hot, and almost completely smokeless flame. In terms of its pure heat capacity, it easily and confidently surpassed some types of poor, young, or wet wood. It provided excellent, long-lasting, and stable heat, which was ideal for heating a small enclosed living space. Modern survivalists are often amazed at how effectively this ancient method of passive heating works. Peasants obtained first-class premium fuel from what we today try to get rid of as quickly as possible with disgust. This alternative fuel was also ideal for slowly cooking hearty meals in large clay pots. The heat from the manure briquettes was distributed very evenly, without creating sudden and dangerous bursts of high flames. Housewives could safely leave thick soup to simmer on such coals all day long while they went about their business. It was a true medieval analog of a modern smart multi-cooker, only it ran on free cow patties. The dishes turned out incredibly rich, and the even heat from the hearth continued to slowly warm the cold stone walls of the dwelling. Stocks of such organic fuel took up a lot of valuable space, so large separate sheds were often built for them. The briquettes were stacked in neat rows, creating entire high walls from the biomass harvested over the summer. The higher and thicker the wall, the more confidently the peasant looked forward to the approaching harsh winter. It was not the person with jingling gold coins who was considered rich, but the one whose barn was bursting with ready-made fuel. It was a completely different pragmatic economy where the value of things was determined solely by their ability to warm the body. And manure was one of the most stable, understandable, and reliable currencies in this harsh economy. This method of heating proved so phenomenally successful that it is still actively used in many regions today. In the treeless, harsh steppes of Asia, people continue to confidently heat their stoves with dried dung, ignoring modern technologies. They know for sure that it is incredibly reliable, absolutely cheap, and guaranteed to save them in the most terrible night blizzard. Ancient people always knew ingenious solutions that the modern world often considers backward or ridiculous. But the cold mathematics of survival always remains the same, no matter how comfortable the century we live in is. Dried manure has become a vivid symbol of how humans can subjugate even the most unpleasant natural resources. Instead of giving up in the face of imminent cold without firewood, people adapted the environment to suit themselves. They turned foul-smelling livestock waste into an invaluable source of life-saving energy for their poor homes. This is a perfect example of historical pragmatism where there is no room for silly squeamishness or social prejudice. The next time you complain about the smell in the countryside, just remember this brilliant historical fact. Keeping large domestic animals under the same roof as humans sounds like an absolute sanitary nightmare to us, but it was one of the most ingenious and reliable methods of passive heating in any medieval village. People quickly realized that animals were not only a source of food, but also real, huge walking batteries. Peasant dwellings were often built according to a unique, specially designed architectural type known as a longhouse. One half of such a long building was home to the family, while the other half was used to house cows, pigs, and shaggy sheep during the winter. These two areas were often separated only by a light wicker partition or had no solid wall at all. The animals were kept in a small earthen depression in the floor so that the unevenness would help keep their liquid waste in one place. Large horned cattle continuously give off a tremendous amount of valuable heat through their breath and massive hot bodies. They functioned as living, completely reliable biological radiators, operating at full capacity around the clock without interruption. Modern engineers who design smart, energy-efficient homes are amazed at the sophistication of this ancient heating concept. The system worked without the slightest glitch and required absolutely no additional maintenance by humans. Sometimes the main hearth had to be completely extinguished for the sake of strict and necessary economy of precious dry fuel. On such dark and frosty nights, it was the heat from cows and sheep that saved the peasants from fatal frostbite in their sleep. You fall asleep peacefully, knowing that a few meters away from you, huge living stoves are breathing rhythmically at a temperature of 40 degrees. Sounds incredibly strange, doesn't it? But in conditions of total and deadly firewood shortage, it was the best central heating system in the world. No modern oil heater can compare in reliability to a well-fed, large and contented cow. Of course, such close proximity brought a huge amount of obvious domestic inconveniences for everyone in the house. The smell in such a dwelling was incredibly thick and heavy, and one had to get used to it from early childhood. In addition, animals make loud noises at night, move around, chew, and can greatly interfere with normal, peaceful sleep. A modern pampered person would need only one such night to pack their things and flee to the nearest clean hotel. But for a medieval peasant freezing in the cold, this thick smell and noise meant only one thing: warmth, safety, and life. Interestingly, the overall thermal efficiency of such a house directly depended on the number of animals inside. A rich peasant farm with 3 cows was always much warmer than a poor house with 1 skinny and 6 sheep. Therefore, increasing the number of livestock was the most direct and profitable investment in one's own winter comfort. In winter, daily care of livestock inside the house also became much easier and much safer for the farmer himself. He did not have to go out into the bitter cold and snowstorm to feed the cattle or quickly milk a cow. All the necessary morning and evening routines were performed in relative comfort under one large thatched roof. The less a person moved and went out into the aggressive frost, the fewer calories he wasted completely in vain. Modern researchers have specifically measured the temperature in accurate reconstructions of houses of this type. It turned out that even in the most severe external frost, the temperature inside rarely dropped below +5 degrees. For us, this is unbearable cold, but for a person in warm, multi-layered woolen clothing, it is an absolutely comfortable environment. Living together with domestic animals was the absolute norm for many centuries throughout Europe. It was only with the improvement of stone construction technology and the advent of cheap coal that people began to separate the barn from the living quarters. But before this long-awaited moment, cows were not just a source of food, but full-fledged members of the family, giving life. This is a stunning example of how humans can perfectly adapt to a complete lack of basic fuel resources. Villages survived thanks to this primitive living warmth, which today seems wild and extremely unhygienic to us. The acute shortage of firewood for the freezing population was often caused not so much by the lack of trees themselves. The main problem was always the harsh laws that maniacally protected the private property of the feudal lords. Dense forests were considered exclusive, untouchable hunting grounds for rich lords, dukes, and of course, kings themselves. Huge trees grew literally behind the crooked fence of a peasant's house, but touching them was strictly and categorically forbidden. It was very similar to slowly dying of thirst while standing knee-deep in a clean, fresh river. Cutting down any living tree on a feudal lord's land was severely punished with high fines that no one could ever pay. In some regions of England and France, such a crime could easily be punished by cutting off hands or even public execution. Special forest guards patrolled these areas around the clock, protecting the trees from freezing peasants with axes. To prevent people from dying out completely from the winter cold, the cruel law still left them a tiny legal loophole. Poor peasants had only a so-called limited right to deadwood during strictly defined months of the year. They could legally collect only dead, rotten branches that had already fallen to the ground on their own. Sometimes peasants were graciously allowed to collect dry branches from trees that could be reached with a special hook. This long hook was not supposed to damage the main trunk of a living tree when breaking off fragile dead wood. Imagine this utterly absurd picture: a freezing person trying to knock down a dry branch with a stick, afraid of damaging the bark. It was a cruel game of survival where the rules were dictated by the well-fed and drunken elite sitting by huge stone fireplaces. The legal thin brushwood collected in the forest burned in the home hearth in a matter of minutes, providing no stable heat. It was only good for boiling water very quickly or reheating the pitiful remains of yesterday's bean soup. Using these thin, often damp branches for constant nighttime heating of the house was completely unrealistic and pointless. If an evil forester caught a peasant with an axe deep in the forest, tearful excuses about freezing children did not work at all. The justice system of that dark time was completely blind to human suffering, but very vigilant in protecting the financial interests of the nobility. People were forced to secretly steal good wood at night, risking their lives for a couple of good dry logs. This constant hidden guerrilla warfare for warmth was absolutely commonplace for many European settlements of that time. It sounds like an exciting plot for a crime thriller, only instead of dirty money, ordinary firewood was stolen at night. A frozen person is always ready to commit absolutely any crime if it saves his family from imminent death. Interestingly, in some European regions, peasants paid a special humiliating tax just for the right to enter the forest. They gave the rich lord chickens, eggs, or grain just for the opportunity to gather rotten wood on damp ground. It was a kind of medieval premium subscription to basic survival, and it was incredibly expensive for the poor. Strict forest laws also strictly prohibited grazing domestic pigs in the forest during certain abundant acorn seasons. Absolutely all forest resources, from wild boars to the last pine cone, belonged exclusively to the owner of the land. The peasants were left with only open fields, dirty swamps, and their own incredible ingenuity in finding combustible materials. Modern historians often and rightly cite these laws as one of the main reasons for high mortality rates in winter. The feudal system always placed the value of a beautiful tree above the value of the life of a simple laborer on this land. This forced rural communities to unite even more strongly and jointly develop new effective survival strategies. So the acute shortage of firewood was often a completely artificial problem, created by greed and deep social inequality. But even the most cruel laws and threats of having one's hands cut off for taking a branch cannot completely break the human spirit. The peasants looked at the forest, realized that it was closed to them forever, and went to dig dirty peat in the swamp. This remarkable ability to find workarounds saved more lives than any gracious royal decree of the time. And in the next chapter, we will see how dwellings themselves became the perfect passive weapon against the icy wind. Straw, marsh reeds, and even tall dry ferns were actively used as the most affordable alternative fuel. They grew literally everywhere, cost nothing, and were easy to collect after the main harvest in the fields. But their everyday use required special skills and incredible caution on the part of all homeowners. The main problem was always the excessively high combustion rate of these thin and weightless plant materials. If you simply threw a huge armful of straw into the fire, it would instantly burst into flames like gunpowder and burn out in 30 seconds. To get the most out of these light materials, farmers came up with a very clever system of manual pressing. They tightly twisted straw and stiff reeds into dense bundles, thick ropes, or heavy bundles tied with string. This tedious process required strong hands and a lot of time, but the end result was worth the effort. Most often, these bundles were used to quickly heat up cold soup in the morning before a hard day's work. The quick and intense heat from the straw allowed water to boil in minutes without wasting precious peat or manure. Once the hot food was cooked, this quick fire was immediately and thoroughly extinguished with water. Collecting dry ferns in the autumn forests was a separate, very important activity for poor villagers. Ferns burned slightly hotter than ordinary straw and contained a small amount of combustible natural oils. Women and children carried these huge light sheaves on their backs from the forest to their homes until the first snowfall. This light fuel was stored directly under the roof or in the attic, creating an additional layer of insulation from above. The house was transformed into a warehouse of dry combustible materials, where each twig had its own specific thermal value. Living on such a powder keg was dangerous, but the cold frightened people much more than the possibility of fire. Interestingly, the valuable ash from burnt straw was never simply thrown out onto the dirty street. It was a precious resource that was always used as an excellent fertilizer for the fields in early spring. This ash was also used to make lye, which women used to wash their coarse woolen clothes. The use of dry grass as fuel required constant monitoring of the fire by all the owners. It was not possible to simply throw a bundle into the stove and go to sleep peacefully, as was done with a thick oak log. Someone had to sit nearby and very carefully push the bundle into the fire as it slowly burned. It was a bit like the hard work of a stoker on a steam locomotive, where fuel had to be fed in small portions, but constantly. It sounds incredibly tedious, but on long, dark winter evenings, peasants had plenty of free time. This monotonous activity became an essential part of their daily struggle for comfort and survival in the cold. Straw and grass could not replace thick firewood in terms of constantly heating a house in winter, but they were an absolutely ideal tactical tool for short heating tasks, strictly conserving more valuable resources. People learned to masterfully control the rate of combustion by simply changing the density of the material with their own hands. This is yet another vivid proof that survival in the Middle Ages depended not on wealth, but on ingenuity. The next time you see ordinary dry grass, think about how it saved people from frostbite. When fuel ran out completely or its use had to be severely limited, the most critical moment of winter arrived. In such extreme conditions, clothing became the main and last barrier between a person and the winter cold. We are not talking about modern fashionable lightweight down jackets, but incredibly heavy garments made of thick, coarse sheep's wool. Clothing literally turned into a personal portable home that a freezing person wore around the clock. And this fabric spacesuit was designed according to very strict thermal insulation rules, which still work perfectly today. People wore many layers of clothing at the same time, deliberately creating air pockets between the fabrics. The bottom shirts were always made of simple linen, which absorbed sweat well and protected the skin. Untreated wool was very prickly and irritated the body, so linen acted as a soft, protective buffer. On top of the linen, they wore very thick woolen tunics, heavy pants, thick cloaks, and deep-closed hoods. These clothes were incredibly effective at retaining body heat, preventing it from escaping into the frosty air of the icy room. Modern mountaineers use the same principle of layering in their expensive, high-tech mountain gear. At night, the whole family slept together in one large wooden bed or on a straw mattress. Sleeping alone was an incredible luxury that only wealthy lords with fireplaces in their bedrooms could afford. If there were dogs in the house, they were often taken to bed with freezing people as living hot water bottles. Dogs have a higher body temperature than humans and are excellent at warming cold, frozen feet at night. This was so popular that in some languages, the expression "night of three dogs" even appeared to describe the bitter cold. It is important to note that constantly wearing heavy clothing required people to be in very good physical shape. Simply moving around a cramped house wearing 10 kilograms of wool was a kind of strength training for the muscles. But peasants were well accustomed to hard work, and their bodies easily coped with this additional load. Layered clothing saved Europe during the coldest years when peat and brushwood supplies were running low. When the clay house finally froze through, people simply put on another layer of wool and continued living. Their huge wardrobe was their last line of defense against the forces of nature that they could not control. Today we change our clothes every day for fashion and social conventions in warm, spacious offices. For them, a properly worn warm cloak meant the difference between waking up tomorrow or falling asleep forever. And that harsh reality made them value every woolen thread as if it were pure gold. With the onset of a truly frosty winter, the rhythm of life in a medieval village changed radically and irrevocably. It was completely and rigidly adjusted to the incredibly short daylight hours and the vital need to conserve energy. With the complete absence of a constantly burning wood-burning stove, people simply could not afford to stay awake in the cold. As soon as darkness fell, activity in the house ceased because every movement burned precious calories. The village was plunged into an absolutely eerie silence, broken only by the howling of the wind and the mooing of cows. People practiced what is known as segmented or biphasic sleep, which seems like a strange anomaly to us today. They went to bed very early as soon as it became completely dark, usually around 6 or 7 in the evening. But sleeping for 12 hours straight in a freezing room was physically difficult and very, very uncomfortable. This winter regime of maximum energy conservation had a strong impact on the mental state of people in the village. Constantly being in a cramped, dark, and stuffy room with animals led to severe sensory deprivation. They had no internet, no television, or even good bright candles to read a book by on long evenings. Interestingly, small children at this time of year often stayed in bed for most of the long daylight hours. They simply had nothing to do in the cold, damp house, and they were relatively safe under the blankets. Parents understood perfectly well that children's bodies cool down faster than adults, so they tried to limit their movements on the cold floors. Even large domestic animals completely adapted to this sleepy and sluggish rhythm of their owners' lives. Cows and sheep moved much less, slept more, and tried to conserve their own biological resources. The whole village turned into one large, slowly breathing organism that patiently awaited the return of the saving sun. Modern researchers call this period a historical analog of the mass energy-saving mode in modern electronics. The battery is running low, so all background applications are turned off, leaving only the most vital functions of the organism. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, the stomach digests food, but all external activity is put on a very strict pause. Winter sleep mode proves that our harsh ancestors were incredibly flexible and amazingly adaptive creatures. They did not try to fight the mighty forces of nature. They completely submitted to its harsh winter rules for the sake of survival. Today we try to live at the same frantic pace all year round, completely ignoring the seasons and the signals from our bodies. They understood that winter is a time to stop, freeze, and just breathe quietly in the warm air under the covers. In the next chapter, we will learn what exactly they ate to maintain this inner fire during hibernation. In order to survive the bitter cold without burning wood, warm clothing alone was not enough. Peasants needed a special, very specific winter diet that triggered powerful processes of internal biological heating throughout the body. They were physically unable to warm the air around them, so they decided to warm their bodies from within. The basis of their meager winter diet consisted of very thick, heavy, and incredibly rich daily soups. These austere dishes did not look very appetizing, but they were loaded with an explosive dose of essential calories. The main ingredients of such winter soups were dried beans, hard peas, oats, and tough winter root vegetables. These simple carbohydrate foods could be stored for months without rotting and were relatively inexpensive for the common people. But beans alone do not provide much heat, so animal fat was always added generously to the soup. Digesting such heavy, fatty, and very dense food required enormous physical effort from the human body. The stomach and intestines began to work at full capacity, processing this coarse mass for long hours on end. This complex digestive process is always accompanied by the release of large amounts of heat energy inside the human body. Interestingly, during the coldest periods, people often gave up bread in favor of thick, fatty porridge. Bread needs to be chewed and is quickly digested, while thick oatmeal with lard stays in the stomach for a very long time. This ensured a long-lasting and stable supply of energy to the blood without sharp spikes in sugar levels in the body. Modern nutritionists advise eating slow-release carbohydrates for breakfast to stave off hunger during the day at work. If a family could afford to slaughter a pig in the fall, blood sausage became the main winter delicacy. It wasn't pretty, but it contained valuable iron and fat, which were necessary for survival. Absolutely all of the animal's entrails were processed and put to use, Nothing was thrown away to the dogs just like that. Small children were fed first, as they lost heat much faster than adults. They were given the fattiest and most nutritious pieces of fat from the bottom of the pot to keep their little internal fires burning. It was a harsh time when parental love was expressed not in beautiful toys, but in an extra spoonful of fat. Modern medicine fully confirms that at low temperatures, a person's need for calories increases dramatically. What today would lead to severe obesity was then completely burned up in attempts to warm up a cold, dark bedroom. The internal diet proves that the human body is the most perfect and adaptive furnace in the world. With the right fuel, it is capable of sustaining life even in conditions of absolute temperature, hell on earth. Peasants could not change the weather or the laws of the Lord, but they could strictly control what they ate. And this thick, smelly soup with lard was their secret weapon against the merciless winter cold. But sometimes even that was not enough. And then the great power of human unity came to the rescue. During periods of the most severe and prolonged frosts, the moment of truth arrived for every small rural community. When the personal reserves of alternative fuel in individual households were inexorably coming to an end, the situation became critical. Individualism in such extreme conditions meant certain death, so the village turned into a single, cohesive survival system. People put aside all petty quarrels and old grudges, realizing that in the face of the elements, they were all absolutely equal. Several related or neighboring families could temporarily gather under one roof to save their lives. Usually the largest, most reliable, and best insulated wooden or clay house in the entire settlement was chosen. They transferred absolutely all of their remaining meager supplies of peat, cow dung, brushwood, and dry grass there. In the center of this house, a single powerful, huge common hearth was maintained around the clock, fueled by all the collected resources. But the main secret of this method lay not only in the banal economy of firewood or peat briquettes. In one cramped enclosed space, the precious heat of dozens of human bodies and many domestic animals was concentrated. 20 people breathing and radiating heat in a small room can raise the temperature to absolutely comfortable levels. In such communal winter camps, strict discipline and a clear division of responsibilities among all people prevailed. Someone constantly monitored the fire, while others cooked thick soup for everyone in a huge pot. Women mended clothes together, and men did minor repairs on tools, trying not to waste energy. Living together in one house also greatly helped to maintain the psychological health of the trapped people. When you are freezing alone in a dark hut, panic and despair kill faster than the cold itself. In a crowd, people joked, told old tales, and supported each other morally, keeping each other from going mad. Interestingly, in some communities, wealthy peasants were simply obliged to let the poor into their homes. It was an unwritten rule of survival, firmly established by tradition and the harsh conditions of the Northern European winter. Refusing to give warmth to a freezing neighbor was considered a terrible sin, for which the community could later take cruel revenge. At night, such houses resembled a huge bed, thickly covered with layers of woolen cloaks and old animal skins. People slept huddled together on the straw-covered floor, warming each other's backs in pitch darkness. Small children were always placed in the very center of this large human pile, where it was warmest. As soon as the weather improved slightly, families returned to their frozen homes to check on their condition. They carefully took a handful of hot coals from the common hearth with them to rekindle their lives. This transfer of fire had enormous symbolic significance, signifying victory over the most terrible stage of the harsh winter. Modern sociologists study such historical examples of communal survival with great professional interest and admiration. They prove that in moments of severe crisis, people tend to unite rather than kill each other. We are accustomed to thinking that the Dark Ages were a time of cruelty, selfishness, and complete lawlessness everywhere. Community centers are the main proof that technology will never replace human solidarity. You can invent the best insulation or collect the perfect fuel briquette from dried manure and grass. But when all your supplies run out, it is your neighbor's warmth that will be your last chance to live to see the spring sun. Medieval villages survived not because of lords or kings, but in spite of their cruel prohibitions and taxes. They survived because they stuck together. turning their modest dwellings into impregnable fortresses of warmth. Today we take warmth for granted, simply turning the radiator knob in our cozy and bright apartment. We have forgotten that for thousands of years, warmth was a huge privilege that had to be fought for every day. Peasants spent half their lives preparing for winter, collecting manure, peat, and rare dry branches. The next time you drink hot tea in a warm room, remember these harsh people. Remember that your ancestors survived in conditions that would break any of us in a week today. They dug mud out of swamps, molded briquettes out of manure, and endured suffocating smoke to save their lives. This inspires enormous respect for human nature and its ability to find a way out of the most hopeless situations. Their methods seem downright barbaric to us, but it is these methods that allowed humanity to survive until the era of central heating. Ancient people always knew ingenious solutions that the modern world has arrogantly forgotten or unfairly underestimates in favor of technology. But the fundamental laws of survival remain unchanged. Conserve energy, use available resources, and unite with others in times of crisis. Modern science only confirms what peasants knew from practical experience many centuries ago, thanks to their bitter experience. From thermogenic diets to the principles of passive houses, all of this was invented by desperately freezing people in the Middle Ages. And who knows, maybe one day this ancient, harsh knowledge will once again be useful to our high-tech but fragile society. Thank you for watching this huge story to the end and immersing yourself in this frosty but interesting history. I hope that now winter in the Dark Ages seems a little clearer and much more impressive to you. If you enjoyed watching this video, please support the channel and share it with your freezing friends. There are many more amazing historical discoveries ahead of us that break stereotypes about the lives of our distant ancestors. See you soon, and remember, if you have firewood, you are already richer than a medieval king without firewood.